Welcome to Ask Win everyone, and I'll give you my programming announcements. I have two at the end, so we can get going, with Anne. Anne came to me by her publicist. Anne is an executive coach, so without further ado, I'm going, Anne, take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. So I really appreciate the introduction. I'm an executive coach, and I also do a lot of speaking and training as well. I work with clients such as TripAdvisor, Sanofi Genzyme, and Havas. I'm also an executive coach at the Harvard Business School Executive Education, and I have also guest lectured at MIT. I think a little bit about my background. So what did I do before I became an executive coach? Because this is actually my second career path.
Uh-huh.
And I worked in advertising for about 18 years. I worked at companies such as Young and Rubicam, Arnold, and Digitas. And at Digitas, I managed over 75 individuals in a large media department. And I think, people ask me a lot, well, how and why did you make that shift? And while I don't coach on passions a lot, but one of the key pieces for me that I am very passionate about is people. And for me in advertising, what made me the happiest was people growing and getting promoted and learning in my department. So that's kind of the short story of how I made that career change.
Well, okay, so you were stuck in the office cubicle in advertising, and you just said, I want to help people more. I'm sick and tired of sitting in front of the community. I want to see people achieve. I want to see people grow, and I don't want to do the computer stuff anymore.
Right, exactly. And I think one thing, too, that I think is so important is to really always kind of sit back and think about what your values are, what are important to you. Is it learning? Is it intellectual stimulation? And for me, one of the key pieces and why I started to think about other opportunities too was client service is very hard, right? And while I loved and I still keep in touch with clients that I worked with, for me, part of it too was about work-life balance, right? So not working 60 plus hours a week and traveling all over the country all the time. So that was also, I think for me, maybe not so much a lot of other people, it wasn't this aha moment. It was more of all of these ideas and events that came together for me. And I think, I always say this, I wish I had an executive coach back then in terms of how I led, my teams and how I worked with the C-suite folks and how I thought about my next career. But that's kind of the summary of it is all of these kinds of ideas created questions for me, let's say, for me to think about.
So, okay, if someone wants to hire a business coach to make the career pivot, what would you suggest?
Okay, so, in terms of thinking about a career pivot, or let's say, too, it could just even be, I need to know how, I need to work better with how I motivate teams. I think the first thing to think about is chemistry, right? Well, there's two things. It's thinking about the coach in terms of do they have the credentials and the experience that I'm looking for? And number two, I really think that it is about chemistry. And you have to click with that person's style and how they want to work. So those are two key points in terms of thinking about getting or how do you determine which coach is good for you.
And I know you can't say this for anonymity reasons, but do you have any success stories that you would like to share on this podcast?
Oh, sure. Let me think here for a second in terms of I can't share specific specific client pieces, but I think that a couple of success stories that I have is not every story has to be about an aha moment. Okay. I think one interesting story that I have is, and this is somebody that I just coached that was a director, he was overusing his strengths. He has very high emotional intelligence, but he was overusing his strengths because when he went into a meeting, his self-awareness about what was happening in the meeting was so high and acute that just somebody kind of frowning or that really quick physical piece, he could pick up very quickly. So he started to, overanalyze. Well, maybe that person isn't confused or not liking what I'm speaking about in the meeting. And he needed to take a step back and think about, okay, I'm overusing my strengths. So what does that mean? And what are the triggers that come up with that come from that? And then because he had that self-awareness, he could discern whether that frown was really meaningful or just somebody frowning, for example.
Yeah. And so, Anne, what is your favorite book? It doesn't have to be a business book. It just has to be a book that you go back to time and time again.
Well, this actually is a business book that I go back to time and time again, and it is Stand Out by Dory Clark. And why I like this book so much, because I think it cuts across both, if I love fiction as well, but I think it cuts across the fact of just thinking about what makes us unique as people. And I think that's really important to just really think about what your strengths are, what are the opportunities, what are your passions, what am I good at, what can I put out there in the world, whether it's specific content, things like that.
So you would recommend Dory Clark's book. She actually, you guys, did a written interview on my podcast, and she cannot do a podcast interview. So I said to Dory, okay, you can do a book. That's fine. And one of the things she talked about is her book Stand Out. So I'm happy that Anne recommended a book that was from a previous podcast host that Anne really likes, and I know that Stand Out was traditionally published, so you can go find that on Amazon. Also, Google Dory Clark. Also, follow her on LinkedIn. She occasionally pops up on my LinkedIn, and she's really poetic in the way she thinks about business, and it was a wonderful interview she did on my podcast, the Missing Portion. I am trying to get her on to do the audio portion, but I still haven't swung that one yet because she's so busy. So, Anne, thank you for your book recommendation. You didn't know I had the written portion of Dory Clark on my podcast. Now, that's a secret that no one knows yet, but now they do. So, and if you had to be educated by anyone, who would it be and why?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
if you had to be educated by anyone, who would it be and why?
So I think that there's a couple of people. There's a woman named Amy Cuddy who wrote the book Presence, and it's all about presenting and having presence in a meeting. And she teaches at Harvard, and she's written numerous books. She's fantastic. I think the other person that I would have loved to be taught by, because on the side, one of my passions is writing poetry. And I would have loved to have been taught by somebody like Maya Angelou in how to write better.
Yep. And so, well, those are great influences to be taught by. And my last and final question, and then we'll go to where people can find you on the internet, is how are you going to help people with disabilities? What's your next big goal as far as teaching them or as far as the executive coaching realm?
So when I think about that, when I think about that question, the most important thing I think about is how can we all leverage our strengths? We all have, and I think one thing that is just easy for all of your listeners to do is to take the Gallup Strengths Finder. You can buy it on Amazon, and you get a code, and it really, I think it's about the self-awareness of all of our gifts and how we can just leverage our abilities from that perspective.
So you would recommend people take the Gallup Strengths Finder and really solidify their gifts?
Absolutely. I think the self-awareness of knowing what your strengths are, and I think too, the interesting piece is when you find out what your strengths are, well, how can I use those in combination? Almost kind of cross-train. So, if I want to get better at strategic thinking, well, I'm a great communicator, and I'm also high in creativity. This is just an example. Well, if I use the combinations of creativity and communication, that can help me be more strategic, right? So it's leveraging all of the just fantastic gifts that we have.
Well, that's wonderful. And how can people get in contact with you if they want to?
So the best way to reach me is on my website, and it is AnneSugar.com. And so that's spelled ANNE, sugar, SUGAR, just like sugar.com.
And I know you don't have any questions for me, or maybe you do, but I would love to extend the opportunity for you to come on this podcast anytime, because I think the knowledge you brought to us today, and I say us because it's not about me, it's about my fan base, is a phenomenal wealth of information, and I wish you the best of luck. Now, do you have any questions for me or no?
So I do have one question for you. And first, I would love to come back on your podcast again. I'd be thrilled to. So I think the question that I have, and here's how I will preface it. I am working with many successful people out there, many other people that are working on goals. One of the differentiators I see out there is reading. A lot of people we just don't have time anymore to read as much as we should or want to. And I can say that for myself as well. So I would be curious, what is a book that you would recommend?
Can it be the latest Stephen King book? Yes, people, I'm actually listening, which does count as reading, to the latest Stephen King book. And it's not that scary, and it's actually really good. And I'm on chapter 10 of it, believe it or not. And so I would say Stephen King, and my next book, you guys, that I'm going to delve into is the 4-Hour Work Week, because you guys keep talking about this 4-Hour Work Week, so now I have to find that one on the audio tape. But after Stephen King, and I just finished via Kindle Big Magic and Eat, Play, Love back to back. So Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and then Eat, Play, Love also by Elizabeth Gilbert, and two great phenomenal books. And how I'm actually doing that is I'm renting them from my local library, believe it or not. I'm finding Kindle books, and I'm finding audio books.
And you know what? I think that is such a fantastic, great tip, because it just, when you have a little bit of downtime, you have a chance to listen to your book. And getting to Stephen King, he wrote a fantastic book called On Writing. And I think it's just as important. I talked about business books, but I think just reading anything. And I love fiction, and I think it's so good for our creativity. And Stephen King always said, he just carries around a book with him. And if he has 5 extra minutes or 10 extra minutes standing in line, well, that's when he reads, right? So he's leveraging all those minutes and those times when it might be quite annoying to be standing in a line or I don't know, stuck in a plane for a while. It's just those times to read or listen to a podcast.
Listening to an audiobook helps, or listen, and makes a great point. Listening to a podcast helps, even though you guys should be listening to this podcast. Just saying. But listening to an audiobook, or listening to, and Anne is laughing at me because of what I just said. But as long as we're consuming information that's not the news, thank you very much. And I won't get political, but I don't see the happy side of the big buffoon in the presidential office. What he did last night in Korea wasn't so happy. So as long as we're not consumed by news 24/7, I'm happy. I try not to watch the news. You guys know that. You guys know that I have cerebral palsy, and he doesn't help me. He's not. He tried to pull Medicaid, which I am on my 30th birthday. Yes, happy birthday to me. His birthday gift, yeah, which you don't want, and we tried to pull it anyway out from under you. And I remember watching the news on my 30th birthday before going to lunch, and I remember thinking, oh boy, here we go. But that didn't happen. That he wants to pull it, but I think sticking a podcast and sticking the Stephen King book in your ear is much easier than news, because right now the news and this political climate is not making me very happy, or not making the rest of the world very happy. So my programming announcement before I let Anne go. Speaking of books, I had a couple more agents because I figured out why. My query letter is way too long. So if someone has some experience, querying agents help me because I'm trying to make my query letter shorter and have an agent love me and say, I want your full manuscript. But they threw me in the trash can. Again, I'm not giving up on querying a book. I'm just a little frustrated right now because they keep throwing me in the trash can for my latest book. But if someone is listening to this podcast and knows all about query letters, help me, because now I need to reevaluate my query letter, and I have another huge announcement which is actually getting solidified today, which next week I can make that announcement official. I just have to now do 3 hour, let's call it cognitive reasoning test, because of this huge announcement. The cognitive reasoning test comes first, so that's today as well, 3 hours, to see if I can handle what this huge announcement is. And for those of you that have been calling me about the aid and sending me good wishes about the aid, you know that CT got in the way of this podcast. Well, I found aid, thank God. So call the cowboy off on that one, and now I can move on to my books and to my next huge announcement, which I will be able to solidify and tell you guys next week. But as far as I know, I'm happy, I'm healthy, and my CP, I just found out yesterday, hasn't gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better either, so that's remained stable. So I'm just throw that in there as good news. And as I said, I thank you, Anne, for coming on the podcast and sharing your wisdom and knowledge and about executive coaching. And I welcome you back on the podcast when you feel the time is right.
Oh, well, thank you so much, and I really appreciate being on your podcast today.
Thank you, and thank you guys for listening and all your love and support of this podcast. And yes, I'm going to keep it going through my schooling, which starts in the next couple of weeks, and that's going to be easy because it's an English class, and I do well with English classes. So that's going to be easy, but next week we have a huge announcement, which I can probably solidify tomorrow if I have time, but definitely next week, you guys, you will hear that. And then if anyone knows about querying agents, please help me, because I'm stuck. I'm stuck with this book, and I love it, but the agents don't, and it's my book, baby, and I want to put it in the best agent's hand possible. But if it worst comes to worst, plan B is self-publishing. But I'm so sick of self-publishing that it's not even funny, and Amazon is changing 1,000 miles a minute, and even though I have a small publishing deal, I'm not quite ready to publish this book with them, or maybe I am. But I'm first trying the querying trick, but the querying trick is backfiring on me. So if anyone knows about querying agents, please help me, and I will try again. I still have my book on querying submission, and then we'll see what these agents come out with and back with. So just send good vibes to my book, and everything should be fine. And I thank you guys for listening to Anne and I and me ramble on, and Anne give her wisdom. And thanks to you guys. Bye.